Chris, again, thank you for all the hard work in organizing this wonderful conference. And I'm seeing Bobby Rahal right now. We're going to bring him on, and we'll get our production team to coordinate with Adrian, and we'll let you get started, Chris, with Bobby first. And we are going to ask him to start his video and camera, and we should be going. So Adrian, you should be with us any second. Our team is in touch with his team. So why don't you start, Chris, with while we have Bobby, and we're going to get Adrian on.
Good morning, Bobby.
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Bobby. Thanks so much for joining us. And
My
thanks for
pleasure.
being first. I'll have you know that Adrian asked for you to be with him. He was so keen to do this with you, and now you've beaten him to the punch.
Well, Adrian's God, so he can be late.
Wow. Very kind of you to say. I know you wanted to work with him on multiple occasions during your career. Just where are you joining us from today?
Indianapolis, at our new headquarters here. So, yeah, I think I'm in the right place.
Yeah, certainly are. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian, it looks like is just popping up as well. So we'll let him get his camera running and microphone live over a few seconds, and then I've already said in our little build up here that really my role is just to tee you guys up to chat, because with the experience and history you have and the friendship you two have as well, it's going to be, I think, just fascinating to everyone to hear the two of you catch up. So Adrian, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Right. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. There he is.
Yeah. Very well, thank you.
Yeah. Good. Sorry, battling with Zoom. We never use Zoom. It's just a pain in the backside, but anyway.
Not a problem at all. And we really appreciate this, because if I understand rightly, you're on holiday already, aren't you? Well, I say already, but after the end of the F1 season?
No, not really. No, definitely not holiday yet. It's kind of all, really you start thinking about the next season from kind of springtime, and we're deep into the development of next year's car now.
Well, I do apologise. That was Paul told me that you might be trying to have a bit of a break. But either way, thank you so much then for making the time.
I will be in a week's time or so. Try to get a break.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very much well earned, and as you say, it's such a busy time for you. But it's great to have you both together for this one, because obviously you go way back. And Adrian, if I start with you, can you just explain to anyone who's joining us for this webinar your relationship with Bobby and kind of where it started?
Crikey. Well, that was really back in when I was at March, which was run by a guy, Robin Hurd, the owner of the company. And it made production cars for various series, including Champ Car as it was then, or Kart. And he started a program of effectively rent an engineer from March out to the teams. And so after my year in IMSA GTP in '83, then Robin put me onto that sort of engineer for hire program, placed me at True Sports with Steve Horn. Bobby, of course, was the driver, and that's where it all started from.
And Bobby, what do you remember at that time? Getting Adrian dropped on you, I guess.
Well, I mean, Adrian was quite young, younger than I. I think I was 29, or no, I was probably 30 or 31 at the time, because I started IndyCar racing at 29. But which was young in those days, based on when you could start driving, in the U.S. But Adrian came to us in '84, as he said, and we were a small team that had some success, but the '82 season had been pretty good. '83 was okay, but we wanted better. And Jim Truman, who owned the team, had developed a relationship with Robin Hurd, and we managed to sign an agreement. I remember signing it at Phoenix prior to the race weekend that year in '83, and we I don't know if we quite knew who we were getting, but we got Adrian. Of course, he had spent some time over here because of the GTP program. But Adrian came and lived in Columbus with us, and again, it was a pretty tight knit, small team, which was maybe good for all of us, because we had to work very closely together. And Adrian was just the relationship that I built that we built together, working together. In those days, you didn't really have data acquisition. You didn't have, multiple engineers. You didn't have, 50 people back at the factory looking at video and what have you. It was you and your engineer, and that was about it. And so Adrian and I, we would go out to dinner a lot. Because he was alone a lot of the time, and we just developed this relationship and the communication. I think that I dare say that in some respects that probably was better than I had with my wife in terms of communication.
Yeah.
I would, Adrian would answer a question that I'd yet to complete. It was just there was that connection, and there's no doubt about it that I think that that had a lot to do with why we were as successful as we were.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, what Bobby missed out there was that I'd done a year of race engineering in F2, and then a little bit in the GTP series the previous year, but certainly I was kind of quite wet behind the ears as a race engineer, and so it was quite in the deep end, joining an IndyCar team. And Bobby was incredibly patient with me, because I remember the first test was at the short oval at Phoenix, the 1 mile oval, and kind of looking at the car, and those cars kind of looked as if the accident had already happened, as far as I could see, as much as kind of all the wheels are at different camber angles. You had the tilt, you had this thing called stagger, all a complete new learning curve for me. And so it obviously took me a little bit of time to get up to speed with that, but Bobby was very patient while I tried to learn my trade, and as Bobby just said, we very quickly built up a very strong bond as a friendship and professionally, kind of, sorry, phone's making a silly noise. Kind of, and then going out in the evenings, discussing the car. Every sort of Friday evening of a race weekend, Saturday evening, would always be dinner with Bobby and myself and whoever was around, to discuss the car and what we're going to do for the following day and so forth. And so we really did form a very tight bond. It was, I can honestly say that it was kind of, in terms of the relationship between driver and race engineer, then my relationship with Bobby was one of the ones that I feel kind of has been the strongest that I've enjoyed. It was it is almost to go straight in like that, and be so lucky to work with somebody like, well, Bobby was incredibly unfortunate, and really kind of set me up very well for my career onwards from after that.
Well, I kind of want to pick up on something you said there about learning, and then, getting the time to learn, but kind of how you learn from each other, because obviously motorsport is technically so complex, but it's also about relationships and experience and how you get on with the people you work with. So Adrian, from your point of view, when you went over there and everything you learned in US racing and the variety of US racing that you worked in, how did that then, I guess, inform your future that became someone who is so revered in the world of Formula One car design now?
Well, I mean, any race car team that's building its own cars as well, then it will have 3 departments, which is aerodynamics, race, mechanical design, and then call it vehicle dynamics, which includes all the simulation tools we have now, but of course also includes race engineering. So, and in those days, as Bobby said, there was race engineering was simply race engineering. There was no other part to vehicle dynamics. That's all there was. So kind of learning one of those 3 key figureheads or key departments, learning my trade in one of those departments at that age was completed my, if you like, my initial learning curve, because I started in Formula One as a aerodynamicist, done a year and a half as an aerodynamicist at Fittipaldi. Then at March, started as a junior draftsman and kind of worked my way up through that. Sorry, that will stop ringing. So So by the time I joined True Sports, then I'd kind of done the other two bits of aerodynamics and mechanical design. So it completed that part of my training, if you like, that allows me then to be able to take an overview of holistically of the whole car in terms of aerodynamics design and how it operates at the track.
Yeah,
And from your point of
I might add that there were a lot of 84C Marches on the grid in those days. I mean, March was really the dominant manufacturer at the time, and you had Lola as well. And in '84 in particular, the Lola was quite a good car. Mario had one, Danny Sullivan had one. It was probably, if you looked at when the cars first came over, probably the Lola was a better car. But as the season progressed with our car, it was because of Adrian's insight and intuition about what needed to be done to make the car better. We did a number of things to that car to make it more effective. For example, cutting the underside of the nose further up so you could run the ride height lower in the front, or lowering the side pods, the top of the side pods down, because there was a fair amount of drag in the car, and just various things like that. So, and ours was the only 84 March that had that. And frankly, I think ours was the only 84 March that was competitive to the Lolas. We won several races that year, but we fought, particularly by probably Cleveland onwards, we fought Andretti and Sullivan pretty much on equal footing because of all these modifications that Adrian had put into effect. And again, I think it was because he had a vision of what it should have looked like, or what it should look like, and if he were going to redo it. And I think in those days, the design of the car at March was a shared responsibility by a number of people. Somebody got the back end and somebody had the front end, and next thing you know, you have a complete car. But and of course in '85, when Adrian was with us, the '85 car was his baby, really, to my understanding, to my recollection, and the car was a much better car than the '84 car, and it really reflected Adrian's, I think, insight and intuition and imagination.
Yeah, it's certainly a busy period for me, because on the back of us getting with Bobby's with our race engineering driving combination, and then all the mods that we made to the car, which it was a very heavily modified car by mid-season. Then yes, Bobby was then able to get on terms, as he said, with Mario and Danny, and Robin Hurd, of course, was coming over to the States, so he was observing that. And so kind of around that mid-season mark, he said, right, you're in charge of the design of next year's IndyCar, which then gave me quite a busy time kind of commuting backwards and forwards. So race engineering at the weekends, then going back to the UK to get on with the design of the '85 car. And that continued through the history, then repeated itself the following year, where I was doing the same to design the '86 car.
Well, apologies from my side to skip this forward a little bit, but I want us to get to kind of where Motorsport's at right now before the end of this, and also a couple of questions from people who are watching. But I wanted to go to this is partly an interest question on a personal level, but the Jaguar years. And Bobby, when you were trying to bring Adrian in to Jaguar within Formula One to work with you, how exciting would that have been from your perspective to have teamed up within Formula One, and how close did it feel like it came?
Well, I mean, that would, I think there was a lot of comment at the time, when I signed on with Jaguar. Neil Ressler, who was the chief technical officer of Ford Motor Company, is the one who brought me in. We had been a Ford Works team in IndyCar towards the end of my career, and then up to that point in 2000. And I guess he kind of liked the way we did things. But the minute it was announced, all of a sudden everybody got a lot of comment in the press and by some of the aficionados. Oh, well, obviously Adrian's going to go work with Bobby now. And of course, Adrian had a lot of responsibilities and had so much success at the point that, and Jaguar was a team that was trying hard, but, needed better direction or what have you. So obviously it was something that I was going to pop the question eventually. So, because that would only make sense, right? As my responsibilities as the team principal of Jaguar Formula One, who you going to get? Well, you want to get the best guy in the paddock, and that was Adrian, and still is, and which is amazing when you think the longevity of his dominance as a designer is something that's just historic. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. It is kind of ironic that Red Bull then ended up taking over the Jaguar headquarters. So I guess it's there in spirit, maybe it's nothing else. But clearly, as I found at the time, after my first year there at Jaguar and in Formula One, that that Ford's probably commitment to IndyCar, to Formula One, was probably not where it should have been. I remember a meeting with the CFO of the Premier Auto Group. The Premier Auto Group was Ford's little division that included Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo. They actually had Cadillac as part of it at one point in time. And I remember trying to explain to this fellow, the CFO, why it was important for us to get Adrian, and yes, it was a lot of money, but just think how much money he'd save us, because all those years of R&D would be erased, and we'd be able to take advantage of we close that gap dramatically. It took me a day to make the fellow understand that, and that kind of set that kind of upset me, because well, geez, I don't think Frank Williams had to ask anybody to build a wind tunnel. He just went out and did it, or Ron Dennis, or whoever the fellow might have been. So, in any event, it was, obviously there were a lot of factors out there that were for and against the two of us coming in, and in the end, Adrian did the right thing. But it was fun for a while.
Yeah, Adrian, what do you remember
for me,
that?
It was, I'd have loved to have worked with Bobby. Always had a good friendship, which continued long after I stopped race engineering in IndyCar and went to Formula One. So the opportunity to work together would have been fantastic, and that's the bit that attracted me to Jaguar. But kind of it became apparent that there's also quite a lot of politics at board level and so on and so forth, and that made me a bit nervous. It's one of those kind of what if ones. As I said, it would have been fabulous to work together. In the end, I kind of became nervous of it, and so it didn't happen. But yeah, in a parallel universe, it would have been fascinating to know how that would have worked out.
Yeah, it really would have. And but you mentioned politics.
I think it was probably around 1992, because it would have been my team at the time. I went up to Montreal and offered a position as one of the principals of Team Rahal at the time. Because to me, Adrian is just, that would be the catch of all time, to be able to have Adrian. And, the reality even then, I think, unfortunately, was that IndyCar was so restrictive in compare, from an engineering standpoint, and still is to this day compared to Formula One. Let's face it, Formula One it's all about the technology, and it's all about the complexity and what have you. And so it didn't work. But I think the thing that's so refreshing or rewarding, probably is a better word, is that regardless, my relationship with Adrian began in 1983, and here we are, 40 years later. Yeah. And I was in Miami, thanks to Adrian, invited us down, my wife and his wife, Amanda, and we just had a great time, and it was great to be a part of it. And, I just have tremendous pride for Adrian, just the job he does, it's just amazing. And So regardless, over the history of our relationship, there's been, here, up, down, whatever. But the strength of it is probably greater today in my mind, and I think in Adrian's as well. We don't want to speak for him, but the strength is greater today as it's ever been.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm not
Well,
going to say that. I thought you said the friendship bit, but yeah, no, that's kind of you. No, but I think, as Bobby says, that friendship between us has endured, and that's been a real high point.
Yeah, and as you said that you could have worked together, but politics kind of was something that you're wary of then. From the outside, it certainly looks like that's maybe one of the reasons why you fit so well at Red Bull, and the clarity that there was from the leadership there. Is that the case? Is that why it's been such a good fit for you, and you've been able to really find a home there for such a long period now and turn it into such a dominant racing team?
I think that the great thing, what attracted me to Red Bull, really was that kind of, I've been lucky enough to have success at Williams and McLaren, but they were both great teams that had won races and championships long before I arrived, and perhaps in both cases had got a bit lost. Their competitiveness had gone down a little bit, but when I joined, therefore my job was very much a design-based job. It was try to improve the competitiveness of the car. The infrastructure of the teams, both teams, was well established. If you wind back slightly further than that, the first team I worked for in Formula One was Leighton House, and that grew out of March. So for me, it was a natural transition from IndyCar into Formula One, but without effectively changing teams, still March. And that was a tiny little team. We were literally 50 people and about 4 or 5 engineers. Can't believe it by today's standards. And our performance was a bit erratic, I have to admit, but we considering the size of the team, we had a car that could be very competitive. We almost won in Ricard in 90 and so forth, but the team was starting to lose its money. Akarai Kargi being a bit of a naughty boy and ended up in prison for quite some time, the owner. So that team, I left because it was clear the writing was on the wall. But it felt very much unfinished business, that had we had funding and a bit more time, maybe we could have got somewhere. So when the Red Bull one offer came up, it was really the attraction of being involved in a team more or less from the start, and therefore able to kind of mold it and set it up in the way that I felt would work from an engineering point of view. And I think the extra 3 years, 4 years that I'd had since almost joined with Bobby, perhaps that also helped me then to have just a bit more maturity to that. What was really quite a different task, which was initially setting up the whole engineering team and getting the infrastructure and the work ethics and the communications correct before concentrating as much on the design side.
Well, speaking of design, this year's RB19, I mean, the most successful and dominant Formula One car in history. How have you created then a team around you that has been able to produce something like that in a time where, is it fair to say it's maybe the most restrictive set of regulations you've had to work under?
Well, I think if you go back then so I started at Red Bull very early 2006. And as I said, that it was then kind of setting up the engineering team, and particularly communications, seating plans, trying to reduce the meeting culture that seemed to be quite strong, trying to kind of also get people just to talk to each other rather than emailing each other all the time, getting all the departments sitting geographically next to each other rather than in different buildings, the 3 departments I referred to earlier. So it's getting all that right initially. And then from that, we've just grown that basic structure, managed to attract some great people through the years. So fantastic team of engineers that we now have, but try to run it as a very flat structure. Of course, you have to have an organogram of who's in charge of who, but as much as possible, we try to run it flat. And that hopefully makes it a place where people enjoy working there. That becomes feeding, that if people enjoy working there, then it's easier to attract good people. It's easier for them to kind of perform at their best. And that's really, as Bobby alluded to earlier, motor racing ultimately is a people sport, and it's the people that work in the company that are key to its success.
Well, speaking of people, then I want to bring in a question that we've had from someone who's following here to kind of get you both involved in this, because it's from Colin Ashlaw. Sorry, Colin, who says, from your perspectives, and maybe Bobby, if you want to start with this, says, how challenging was the transition from the more pure mechanical and analog era of the 1980s to the multi-departmental computer-aided design and engineering of today? Did either of you resist, or was it a natural evolution that you were comfortable with over time?
Oh, well, certainly. I think it was probably about 1987 that Pi Electronics was created, maybe 86, but really some of their products put into effect in 87. You know, it was crude. It's very simple, I should say, probably a better term. But all of a sudden now to have that kind of information, I mean, that was fantastic, because it gave credibility to what you might say as a driver. Now some might say, well, no, it wasn't doing that, it was doing this. And here, look what the data says. But I think any driver worth his salt at the time would have said, yeah, this is going to just make me better. And the better I understand it and can use it to good effect, the better I'll be. So for me, it was like somebody turning the light on a bit. That wow, so that's really what's going on here. It's not just, because prior to that, it was really what, here you are supposed to be driving 90 to 100%, and you had to be able to feel what the car was telling you, and then to be able to verbalize that in a way where the engineer understood it, and oftentimes understood it under a real time crunch, in between runs from qualifying or in between practice sessions or whatever. So, I think the advent of data acquisition was obviously that just grew the pace of racing cars so much in that brief period of time. And obviously, as a result of that, the costs go up. You got more people now, and of course now you look at it, and as I said, and ours is a very simple case in IndyCar, because we don't produce anything. In other words, we don't build cars, our own gearboxes. We don't do any of that. We take things off the shelf and try to make them better. So whereas in 1982, when I started IndyCar racing, we might have had 5 or 6 people, in the team. That was that. And, today, per driver, we probably have, 25, 30 people. So, we have our 3-car team here. We've got probably right around 100 people for a car that demands no construction, no production needs, but obviously the ability to interpret all the data that's created every time the car goes out. You need the resource to be able to consume it and understand it and apply it. And so that's a big difference.
For you, Adrian?
Yeah, I think as Bobby said, then the early days of data recorders, which sort of came in somewhere around 87, were very simple. They kind of throttle trace, damper movements, and that was about it. They did, of course, tell you that when the driver came in and said, I'm flat through turn 1 in Indy, you could actually see if he was right or not, and quite often he wasn't. There's a little confidence lift that either was subconscious or just wasn't being fully truthful. But I think then, because these things are evolutionary, then you almost don't notice it because it just comes in slowly. So if I look back, I mean, certainly it wasn't, for instance, in aerodynamics then, up until really kind of towards the mid to end of the 90s, then wind tunnels were your only tool. There's no such thing as CFD, computational fluid dynamics. And the only thing you had to help you visualize what was going on was FlowViz, which you probably see on the Formula One cars in FP1s, and wall tufts, and that was it. So you had to kind of build up your understanding of the flow field from very basic tools, in much the same way as you said with race engineering. Then it was purely talking to the driver and then trying to understand what to do next. That is now very different, and that really is directly the result of computing power that it's obviously mushroomed from kind of mid-80s through. So then CAD systems started to come in and replace drawing boards in somewhere around the mid-90s, to the point I am the only person now left in the industry that still works on a drawing board. But for me, that's just a language. You know, it's whether you use a drawing board or a CAD, I'm not sure it actually is hugely matters. For me, it's just a way of getting an idea from in your head onto a medium. And since I grew up on a drawing board, that's the language that I'm most comfortable with. I'd always be slower than on a CAD system than the kids. So yeah, I don't think you can say it's very different. I don't think there's a better or a worse. It's just different, and you grow and adapt with it.
Well, it's certainly proven out this year, hasn't it, that it certainly hasn't slowed down any of the cars you've designed. So it definitely works. Just checking with Francisca and Julie how long we've got now. Do you need me to wrap this?
I hate to be the one saying we have to end, but unfortunately we didn't have enough time, and wish we could have you on for another 3 hours, but maybe we could make it a tradition. I'd like to send an invitation to have you back maybe for a longer session next time, because that was so wonderful. And thank you, Chris and Adrian and Bobby, for allowing us to have you on. Thank you very much. We're very grateful. So stay with us and have a wonderful holiday, Adrian, after you're done and you're traveling. And then Bobby will probably see you in the next few races. So thank you very much for being with us.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. To start, click on the Join for Free button on the homepage. First, search your company to see if it's already in our database. If you see your company on the list, click on it to select it. Then, choose Claim Company if you are one of the decision makers, an owner, marketing person, or main company contact. Or choose Join Company if you are an employee, and press Continue. If you couldn't find your company in our database, select Register a New Company. On the following page, fill out your name, email, phone number, job title, and choose a secure password. If you chose Register a New Company, you'll need to choose your business type. Select Supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose Racing Business if you're looking to source new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose Race Team if you own or are a member of a professional race team. Then, enter your company name. Please provide a website, Facebook page, or LinkedIn if you have one, and choose to either claim or join the company. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Finally, click Register Now and your registration will be submitted for approval. An email will be sent to your inbox. Please confirm your email address and you will be approved shortly. Welcome to EPARTRADE.